Sex trafficking is one of the fastest growing organized crimes in the U.S., and it's happening right here in Minnesota. How severe of an issue is sex trafficking, and what is our community doing to address one of the oldest forms of oppression? I'm Brenda Kamal. This is Our Issues, Twin Cities.
As a little girl, Bosnia had dreams. She wanted to graduate high school, be a mechanic, and become a mother.
I was a mother's child, that's all. You know, like, that was it. It was me and mom, that's all that mattered.
She was mama's little girl, but at the young age of just 9 years old, the little girl who never wanted to leave the nest suddenly found herself on the streets.
I was molested by my mom's boyfriend, and I had to have survival sex because it's either do this or I kill your mom. My mom's my dream, that's my life, so I will not allow that to happen. So whatever you need from me, I will continue to do and keep quiet, you know, in order to keep my mom safe. By the time I was 16, I had really got introduced to it, and my mom was on her deathbed, so once again I had to do survival sex and have a sugar daddy and all this stuff.
For the next 20 years, Bosnia's world was surrounded by prostitution and drugs. She became homeless, heavily addicted to crack cocaine, once beaten, left for dead, and arrested over 150 times.
The hustle and bustle every day was to survive. I had to be high to turn a date. In order to get high, I had to turn a date. You know what I'm saying? So one went with the other. There was no middle ground. My world was surrounded by prostitution and drug addiction.
With little hope, and when everything seemed dark and dim, Bosnia saw a glimmer of light.
My friend seen me. Just so happened that day she was on her way to a funeral of another sister that we lost, but the funeral was canceled, and she seen me. So she jumped out the car and she said, "This ends here." And I'm like, "No." You probably need to leave because I'm finna, you know, I don't want to be the reason for you to get trapped back into this life. And she wouldn't leave. And I seen all this stuff going on around me, like drug dealing and tricks and hustling and chaos and dysfunction, but my body wouldn't move, you know. As bad as I wanted to get high and as bad as I seen all this money going on, my friend didn't move, and as long as she sat there, I couldn't move.
From that day, her life as a prostitute became her past. She learned about local organization Breaking Free, who helped her start anew.
I went to Breaking Free and dealt with the issues, and they loved me. They embraced me. They supported me. They fed me. You know, I felt safe. I didn't have to worry about turning a date for somebody to sleep.
Breaking Free is right now the only program in the country that provides permanent housing for women. And right now we have 49 units, 1 and 2 bedrooms. And that's nothing as to how many we really need.
After answering an ad for professional dancers needed in the 1970s, Vanita was lured into prostitution as a way to make money in college. Her short-lived experience led her to create Breaking Free in 1996 as a way to serve women involved in systems of abuse, exploitation, and sex trafficking.
Why was it important for you to create such an organization to help women who have been trafficked?
I started going up into the jails and talking to women with the church that I was affiliated with, and I realized that a certain group of women never participated. And when I got to talking to them individually, I found out that they were involved deeply in prostitution. And they needed somebody to say, what happened to you wasn't okay. You know, that is not who you are. That's something that happened to you. And so that's what I decided, I need to do this. I need to do this to help women, and that's what I've done.
According to the U.S. Department of Justice, The average age of a girl trafficked for sex is between 12 to 14 years. In fact, the FBI has found the Twin Cities is one of 13 cities across the nation with high rates of prostitution.
Breaking Free's 2013-2014 demographics of 524 sex-trafficked women who received services through the organization found that 6% were underage, 66% of women and girls were of color, 30% had minor children at the time of being trafficked, and 100% were living in poverty.
What do these findings say about the severity of sex trafficking in the Twin Cities?
100% live in poverty, you know, which means that some of the women that we're with now sleep in their cars, and we've had women sleep right out here in the parking lot in their cars. We couldn't find places for them. They're in homeless shelters. You know, the kids are in homeless shelters. It means that the Twin Cities needs to take a real serious look at this issue, continue to. They have started, but they need to dig deeper.
Every year, Breaking Free helps over 500 women escape systems of prostitution.
Many times these women are under constant threat of their pimp, of their trafficker. So how do you guys reach out to these women in order to escape the life of trafficking in a safe way?
We have an outreach team, street outreach team, that actually gets right out there. And these are, our outreach team consists of women who have been in the life and been out of the life. So they really do know the streets. They know how to work them, and they know a lot of the women that are still out there. And they're not afraid to get out there and talk to them, and they kind of know who to look for, who's a bad guy, who's a pimp, who's not only the pimp, the dope man. You know, these are their people to be leery of.
Bosnia is now on the other side of the street, reaching out to exploited women and girls in order to help them break free of the life she once lived.
The other women that are still struggling know me as one of the bottom of the bottom. And for them to see me like this gives them hope. They're like, wow, okay. Things can happen, you know, stuff can be different, and when I go out there, I plant a seed, and it's real personal. That's my family.
They go out there every month, at least 3 or 4 times a month, and it's what they do is they connect right with the women that are out there, and they give them the opportunity. Now, getting out is a process. Just because she's talking to me or talking to an outreach worker doesn't mean she's going to leave right that minute. It's a process.
I've been here over 13 times. Back and forth, and each time I came back, no matter if it was just to drop in and take a bath, change clothes, get something to eat, and then go again, the doors were always open. It was always, you're welcome here. There was no, oh my God, where you been? It was like, what do you need right now? That's all we worry about is this moment right now, and that's what mattered.
When we return, a Twin Cities County's effort to putting an end to sex trafficking.
911, where's your emergency?
Hi, this is Bonnie, and I'm on run away from Des Moines, Iowa, and I'm in big trouble. I'm afraid I'm about to get killed.
All right, honey. Honey, I'm going to help you, okay? Are you at the Hilton Garden Inn right now?
Yes.
How old are you, honey?
I just turned 18. The people who are wanting to hurt me are just left. They told me I was supposed to make money, and they've been making me sleep with guys.
In 2010, research done by the Chaparro Group revealed the shocking scale of commercial sex trafficking of adolescent females. The study found that on any given weekend night in Minnesota, an estimated 45 girls under the age of 18 were sex trafficked through the internet, classified websites, and escort services.
Is there a lot of demand to buy and sell women for sex here in Minnesota?
If I had a laptop computer with Wi-Fi and we posted an ad on Backpage.com, I guarantee you that the phone would ring within 2 minutes, and it would ring all day.
Backpage.com is the prime site for illicit escort ads, where tens of thousands of girls and women are sold through online solicitations for sex in the metro area. Ramsey County Attorney John Choi is leading the fight against sex trafficking.
This is all about vulnerability, and it's about population, because this crime is driven by demand. And so wherever we rank as a Twin Cities metropolitan region, as a state of Minnesota in terms of population, I'd be willing to bet that we're commensurate with whatever population ranking we are. I mean, this exists everywhere in America.
It's still a multi-billion-dollar industry throughout the world, and as long as there's a demand for it, it's like any other product. If somebody wants it, they want it.
This is a serious issue, and it's targeted at our most vulnerable people, and especially children, teens, and it is alive and well. I say to people throughout the state of Minnesota that if you have runaways in your community, you have this issue of oftentimes where it starts as sexual exploitation and then may develop into sex trafficking.
50% of domestic prostitution victims in the U.S. are runaways living in the street.
They're really the most vulnerable, especially if you are really, really young. And because you have no place to live, you have no money in your pocket, you don't have a job, and so it's easy. I mean, in my estimation and based upon my experience of all the cases that we have, that's a typical population that would be targeted by traffickers. And I would say that would, in terms of the percentage, I'd say a third of our cases probably involve runaways.
On July of 2011, Governor Mark Dayton signed Safe Harbor, Minnesota into law, treating sexually exploited children under the age of 18 as victims in need of protection and not as criminals, prompting counties across Minnesota to focus on a more victim-centered response.
It's about police officers having that mindset that when I'm interacting with somebody, I'm in a situation where I'm trying to help, I'm trying to connect them to services, and I'm not really interested in this individual participating as a witness to a trafficking situation. The first mindset is that I need to help. From that, what ends up happening is that trust and confidence is really built between law enforcement and the victim.
Due to the increasing rates of children and women being bought and sold for sex in the Twin Cities, Ramsey County has trained over 3,000 Minnesota police officers and community advocates to fight sex trafficking.
Can you talk about what the trainings entailed?
The biggest issue is better identifying these situations. Because if you have a mindset of maybe that trafficking doesn't exist here in the state of Minnesota, or you don't even know what you're looking for, right? And who gets targeted for these types of crimes. So it's training law enforcement so that they can better identify these situations. So for instance, if they were to pull over a car and there's an adult male who is maybe 40 years of age and you've got somebody who's maybe 16 or 17 and they're unrelated, it's flagged, helps them flag these issues and to ask appropriate questions. It also, we've been focusing on helping investigators develop these cases, how to do John stings, how to do an investigation against a trafficking ring. And then we've also trained not only the police officers, but frontline professionals around what the new law is and what it isn't, and how we can improve things. But most importantly, in addition to the training, the legislature also appropriated money to actually create the safe harbor, because you can't have a safe harbor law that works unless you have services and shelter space. And so when we started this conversation back in 2011, there were just 2 beds. And today there's close to 50 beds providing these services. So that's made the whole world of a difference.
Before the Safe Harbor law was passed, there were very few sex trafficking cases in Minnesota.
First of all, we couldn't even find the victims, right? And then secondly, they were reluctant to testify because they didn't trust the police. We used to have, back in 2010, I want to say about 13, 14 prosecutions. I mean, today it's increased by about 450%. We have about 75 of these a year where the trafficker is being held accountable for what they're doing to the victims across the state of Minnesota. So we've had dramatic increases, but we could have never ever gotten to the place where we got those convictions unless the victims were willing and able to testify. Right?
To come forward.
That's right. And people don't raise their hand and say, I'm being sex trafficked. But if you create an infrastructure in which police officers can better identify and they can make better connections where they're just helping and they're not putting somebody in jail, right, in detention, and they're developing a different type of relationship, and our community is thinking differently about this crime, then what we have is all of those cases that we've had in Ramsey County where we've gone to a jury, those victims courageously testified and told their story, and that has made the world of a difference.
Up next on Our Issues Twin Cities, how our community is raising awareness to combat human trafficking.
Today, life for Bosnia is much different.
They held my hand until I was able to do things on my own and be independent. They decided to hire me on as a receptionist, and I was like blown back. I just got promoted this year to advocate, you know, and that's my dream, like to give back to the women who are still suffering, whether it's addiction or prostitution.
What do you say to these women that are still struggling to get out of the life?
You won't die like this, you know what I'm saying? This is not how you're gonna die. This is not in God's plan. You won't die like this. This is just something you're going through right now. And I give them a card with my number on it, my personal number on it, to call me just in case. They might not be ready right now, but when they are ready, it can be at 2 in the morning, or it can be at 3 in the afternoon, or it can be at, you know, 2 years from now. But just for them to know that there's somebody who's going to pick up the phone is a big important part.
Is not just something, as we know, that's happening in faraway lands. It happens in our own backyards. It happens to 12-year-olds in my own state. Senator Heitkamp, who's here with us, knows it happens in the oil patches of North Dakota.
In Minnesota, efforts have been underway for a few years now to end sexual exploitation. Recently, Senator Amy Klobuchar addressed the Democratic National Convention, urging America to end human trafficking.
Human trafficking is the third biggest criminal enterprise in the world. As long as ISIS is selling girls for $165 and parents in Nigeria are left with nothing but bows and arrows to chase a terrorist who steal their daughters in the middle of the night, we will never have a just and good world.
It's great to be from Minnesota and have people like Senator Klobuchar and Representative Paulson, who have been real advocates in Washington, D.C., to really set Minnesota as the model for the entire nation, because ultimately the work that they're doing, they're pointing to our state as the model of this collaborative effort with advocacy, law enforcement working together and creating a shift, but also actually getting better outcomes.
What else can the state of Minnesota be doing to protect all victims of sex trafficking?
The one thing that the state of Minnesota can do is put some kind of high priority on special housing for this population. You know what I mean? The women who don't fit in the safe harbor bill, you know, the ones that are over 24, you know, right now, because part of what they're doing is trying to assure that the 24 and unders do have a place to stay, which is beautiful. But a good majority of our women are over that age.
One of the key factors to ending what Vanita calls the oldest form of oppression is to begin by identifying red flags of someone who may be trafficked.
I think it's really looking at her life situation, kind of where she at. Oh, I've been living with a friend of mine now for the last 6 months, and you know, my kids are staying with different people. I mean, there's so many different kinds of things. I got a boyfriend that's 50 and I'm 17.
If you have a suspicion, right, you might be right. You know, like for instance, all of a sudden they might have a lot of cash on them, right, and you've got some other things that are you're wondering of. And so in that context, it all depends on what that context is. But obviously, if you're a true friend or a family member, it's to try to intervene as best as you know how. And then if you're just a stranger, let's just say that you're at a hotel and you're checking in and someone in front of you or behind you in line, there's an older man and a younger woman, and you just feel odd about it because there are certain things that you're seeing, right? There's nothing wrong with calling 911.
And beyond that, it's the role of the community as one coming together to raise awareness and put a stop to human trafficking.
You guys collaborate with a lot of
key stakeholders in the community. How do you work with others like Ramsey County, for example, to combat commercial sexual exploitation in our community?
People need to understand this issue. Other organizations and the county, the governmental agencies, they need to understand about the dynamics of this, how it really works. And our hopes are that as we're invited to do trainings and talk to people about the issue, that'll unlock something within them, you know, to help them understand maybe a little bit more as to why it might be a little bit of a different approach when you're working with prostituted and trafficked women. You know what I mean? And when we're able to talk to, you know, I'll say child protection workers and whoever it is, case managers, social workers, you know, because it is a little bit different, you know, because she's not going to want to come forward with a whole lot of things. And this is the one thing she probably does need to let you know about and talk about. But if she doesn't feel safe, that's always going to be something that she's got in her, and it's always going to come up in different ways. So we really encourage other organizations and agencies to put signs up to say, we look at this as a form of violence. Just in your waiting room somewhere, say something to make those individuals feel more safe.
So what will it take to end sex trafficking?
Well, I think the traffickers wouldn't be involved in this criminal commercial enterprise unless there was a marketplace for it. And so how do we raise boys into believing that it's not okay just to buy another human being for sex?
The individuals who purchase women and girls, there has to be some kind of a consequence. You know what I mean? Maybe it's a felony charge, whatever it's going to do to wake them up and say, we're not having it.
Support from our communities. Stop looking at us like criminals. Stop looking at us like has-beens. Start looking at us like humans. Start looking at us like your daughter or your mom or your aunt or your best friend. And ask yourself, would you be okay with your daughter, your mom, or your best friend? Or would you try to help one of them if they was going through this?
Thank you for joining me this week on Our Issues Twin Cities. I'm Brenda Kaman. See you next time.